On Primetime Politics tonight, caucus revolt. Conservative leader Erin O'Toole is facing a crucial vote on his leadership. Why now? And what happens if he loses that vote? I'll speak with former deputy leader of the party, Lisa Raitt. The Parliament Hill protest, day 5. Many of the protesters are drifting away, but downtown streets of the nation's capital are still clogged, and many protesters are staying put. I'll speak with the mayor of Ottawa about the impact on his city and his message for the protesters. And our panel of parliamentary reporters on the fate of Erin O'Toole and that crucial caucus meeting on Wednesday. And we'll start there with the fate of Conservative leader Erin O'Toole. He's facing a mutiny inside the Conservative caucus that could come to a head as soon as Wednesday. A group of MPs opposed to O'Toole's continued leadership has collected enough caucus signatures to hold a secret vote of the entire caucus on whether O'Toole should step aside. That vote could happen at the regular Wednesday caucus meeting, which, incidentally, will be an entirely virtual meeting. Now, all that's required is a vote of 50% plus one of the 119 Conservative MPs to force O'Toole to step down and give way to an interim leader. Erin O'Toole wasn't speaking publicly today, but in a series of tweets, O'Toole refused to step down and said he welcomes the vote. O'Toole wrote, "I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not turning back. It's time for a reckoning to settle this in caucus right here, right now." O'Toole goes on to write that there are two roads open to the Conservative Party of Canada. One is angry, negative, and extreme, while the other will take the party in a more modern direction with an embrace of inclusion, optimism, ideas, and hope. Here is how some Conservative MPs were framing the leadership vote today.
Well, look, the fact is that the process has been initiated, and when 35 members of caucus call on the leader to effectively resign, then I think that perhaps the leader has some thinking to do.
Does he deserve to stay?
Yes.
Why?
Why not?
So what do you make of what's
Just
happening?
because you've got a bunch of angry Shearites out there, that's the problem.
What do you make of what's going on?
Do you support the standing vote, or do you want a secret ballot?
It should be a secret ballot from what I understand.
What do you hope will be achieved by the whole process? What do you hope comes out of it?
Well, I think I'd put it to bed. Do we support Erin or do we not? So we'll see what happens on Wednesday.
Has he earned the right to continue?
I think he has. He's worked hard.
How much does this dog the party? I mean, this continues. I mean, is there a hope that this will all, like as you say, put it to bed after this vote, or will it not be put to bed?
I can't tell. I haven't spoken to enough of the guys to understand really what's going on, or to understand, who the 35 are, who are they not, who's supporting, who's not. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
There's a whole different raft of issues that have been cited as being difficult. The conversion therapy thing, the stand on Bill 21, Quebec's Bill 21. What do you think is irking people?
Well, I don't know yet. I mean, I've been busy trying to make sure the House of Commons is running, so that's where my focus is right now. So.
You're in Nova Scotian. Is there a geographic split here? Is it the West basically saying no, or?
I'm not sure on this one yet. I think it is a little bit, but I'm not quite sure. Yep.
Okay, thanks, guys. Good to see you.
Well, I'm joined now by a former parliamentarian who served with many of the Conservatives who will be passing judgment on Erin O'Toole's leadership, Lisa Raitt, former deputy leader of the Conservative Party and a former leadership candidate herself at one point. Lisa Raitt, good to see you again. Thanks for your time tonight. What are your observations on what's being described as a revolt against Erin O'Toole? As you watch all of this, what are you thinking?
Well, my observation, first and foremost, it seems to have been brewing for a long time. There are two ways in which to remove a leader. One is by having the leader resign, having the pressure put on the leader so that they go of their own volition, which is what happened with Andrew Scheer. And the other one is to have a leadership review. And that leadership review is one in which it's the membership of the party that makes the decision, and it happens at a national convention. What we have here now is the Reform Act giving the powers to the members of Parliament to remove the leader and appoint an interim leader. But that isn't recognized by the Conservative Constitution, which says the only way to start a leadership race is by having the membership vote that they want to have it happen. So they're kind of in a catch-22.
Right. So you're thinking here they could go through this, let's say for the purpose of discussion, that they were to vote to have Erin O'Toole step down, and that could happen perhaps as early as the caucus meeting tomorrow. I mean, how could he react to that? Could he point to the Constitution and say, I don't have to step down, this is up to party members?
He can say that I'm not leaving as the party leader, or you can't start the process for new leadership because it has to be the members that vote. And it's part of the Constitution. If you lose an election at the next national convention, you are put up for review by the membership. And that convention, by the way, is now set for August of 2023.
But
I view... Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, finish.
No, I said I view this as a tactic to push Erin out the door because it doesn't yield immediately what it is that the MPs want, which is they want him gone.
So, but in practical terms, Constitution, notwithstanding, you have this vote of caucus. If the caucus is not behind the leader, how does he continue?
Well, he said he's going to fight it out tomorrow. That's what the content of his statement was, that they're all going to settle it tomorrow during this caucus meeting one way or the other. As I said, maybe this is the tactic to have him voluntarily step down, but Erin's a fighter. And if he thinks he has more support within the membership as opposed to within his own caucus, then that's the path he'll go.
How much of this do you believe is all about, and it certainly we've heard lots of criticism of Erin O'Toole's leadership from those who don't like his leadership from the day after the election. How much of this and the timing of this is a hangover from that, or Erin O'Toole's more recent policy choices, or perhaps even the split between the western flank of the party and maybe some of the MPs from other parts of the country?
I think that a lot of the members of Parliament felt that this was an election for the Conservatives to win. They were doing well in the polls, and then it all fell apart at the end. I think there was hopes that this review that was commissioned by the party, that James Cumming carried out for the party, was going to be a lot more declarative in terms of what were the mistakes. And when the results came out, it praised Erin for his leadership, which did not actually jive with what the members of Parliament and the candidates had felt was their experience in the actual campaign. So I think that they decided, well, this report isn't going to do anything for us. We still feel the same way. We don't see him moving in terms of his leadership. And as a result, we're just going to take whatever course of action we have in front of us, and it's this, through the Reform Act.
Tell me about the challenges you think he faces. Let's say that he survives this vote in caucus, but he will know that a significant chunk of caucus members want him gone. How does he move forward after that?
Well, it's going to be tough tomorrow because my understanding is that the meeting is going to be completely virtual. It's not going to be about people in a room, eyeball to eyeball, looking at one another. And that actually creates space for people to make decisions that aren't, they may not feel it in the moment. They may think it's a great idea, but not really feel it in the moment. So it's actually almost easier for the no's to win, meaning the ones who don't want Erin anymore, to win the vote than it is for Erin to motivate his supporters to vote in favor of him. So it'll be a tough day for them tomorrow, especially since it's all going to be through the beautiful Zoom functions or the WebEx functions that they have tomorrow.
Right. I mean, there are some complications perhaps around this that they have to sort out. I think my understanding is supposed to be a secret ballot for this kind of a vote. Yeah. And how do you do that virtually? I mean, there could be some serious challenges to make this happen, but we'll watch for that. Look, here we are with the Conservative Party once again talking about internal leadership battles. And I wonder how you think that plays out in the public, the wider public.
So I think they're curious. I mean, I know that I get a few, looks at the bank where I work saying, what's going on there? There seems to be some turmoil, but I don't think it really has as big an impact on Canadians writ large as it does to people who are well versed in what's happening in the Conservative Party. And I think that's the reality of it. It hits Conservatives harder than it does the general public. The general public probably thinks, well, here we go again, another political party. What matters is who's the leader during the election, and do they have a plan to lead into the next election? And I guess the members who have put forth this notice saying that they want to vote on Erin's leadership have decided they'd like to go into the next election with a new leader. And as a result, they want it to happen right away.
All right, Lisa Raitt, always great to get your perspective. Great to talk to you again. A reminder to our viewers, we'll have more on this coming up with colleagues in the press gallery. We'll talk about this as well. But Lisa Raitt, thanks for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Day 5 of the protests on Parliament Hill. The numbers of protesters keep dwindling, but there are still hundreds here, and there are still hundreds of transport trucks and personal vehicles blocking downtown streets. The federal government is still refusing to meet the demands of the protesters, which include an end to all vaccine mandates, including those for truckers at the border. Although the Minister of Transport reinforced the message today that the mandates are not forever.
It is very important to remind Canadians that all of these measures are temporary based on the advice that we receive from public health experts. It's really important to give Canadians hope. We are together in this. We're sacrificing a lot so we can protect lives, but also get out of the pandemic.
And we also heard from the Premier of Ontario today, Doug Ford. He made public statements at a news conference today about what his thoughts are about the protest in Ottawa and suggesting it's time for the protesters to move on. Here's what he had to say.
There's 1 million people that live in Ottawa. You know, I hear you. I hear the protesters. The province hears the protesters. The country hears the protesters. Now it's time to let the people in Ottawa get back to their lives. These businesses that have been closed for a while now, the restaurants want to reopen. So, I get it. I hear you. But we have to let the people of Ottawa live their lives.
Jim Watson is the Mayor of Ottawa, and he is with me now. Mayor Watson, first of all, thanks for taking time to speak with me. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Look, here we are in day 5 of these noisy, disruptive protests. And what's your message to these protesters?
Well, the message is clear. You've had your 15 minutes. You had your rally on Saturday. It's time to go home. Go back home, talk to your own MPs and members of provincial parliament, and allow us to rebuild our neighborhoods that have been affected negatively as a result of people parking, honking horns, allowing their vehicles to run all night, harassing people who are trying to go in to get a cup of coffee. This is completely unacceptable behavior. It does a disservice to any message they were trying to get across, which I fundamentally disagree with. We have so few tools in our toolkit. One is masks, the other is vaccination. And, they have overstayed their welcome, quite frankly, and I think they're doing a lot of harm to the trucking industry and its image by having members of this convoy urinate at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and put up posters at the Terry Fox statue and stealing meals from the Shepherds of Good Hope. I mean, beyond the words of condemnation from you and from clearly other political leaders and others about these protesters, the fundamental thing that people want answered is how long is this going to continue before it ends? What can you tell the people of your city? Well, every day the chief of police and his senior command do a risk assessment. A lot of these people came here wanting to fight, wanting to create violence. We haven't had that so far. We've had a lot of very unsettling images and frustration for our residents because, as you know, Peter, Parliament Hill is not just a series of government buildings. People live in the Central Core and the Golden Triangle and so on. And what the police chief has responsibility to do is to ensure that a situation like this does not escalate to a point where people become harmed or even killed. And we've seen escalations go at, last year at the Capitol building in Washington. So the chief has said, first and foremost, that the situation has to stabilize, it has to de-escalate, and they have contingency plans at some point that they will implement. And when they implement them and what plans they are, that's strictly up to the police. Right. You can't direct police on operations. So, I mean, then let me ask you, because you're part of the briefings, you're in on the conversations, obviously. How do you see this coming to an end, and do you have any sense of when? Well, it's going to come to an end. Obviously, this is not going to be allowed to go on forever. In terms of when that will take place, that, again, is an operational decision that will be made by the chief based on the intelligence that they've received. We've got a lot of police presence, as you know. Police forces from across Ontario and Quebec are here to bolster our police services. And we've been very patient, quite frankly, with this group. And the organizers have been completely irresponsible in terms of any leadership or ownership of some of the outrageous activity and behavior of their members. and they should be the ones telling their members, go back home, get back to business, deal with your own local MPs, and allow these neighborhoods to reopen again.
How much is all of this costing the City of Ottawa?
Well, it's $800,000 a day for police costs alone, and then probably a couple $100,000 in overtime costs for public works, bylaw, paramedics, and so on. So it's very expensive, and our taxpayers shouldn't be paying for this nonsense. We've asked our city solicitor to see what can be done with the GoFundMe fund that they've raised over $8 million, whether that can be tapped into to pay for some of these extraordinary expenses caused by these truckers.
Okay. Is it also your intention to ask the federal government to assume all or part of these costs?
Yeah, we have a good relationship with the federal government, and I spoke with the Prime Minister yesterday, and he's assured us that the federal government is here with us in the long term. They recognize this is a burden on our taxpayers, so we appreciate his positive perspective.
What can you tell us about the impact these protests have had on, in some cases, life and death situations? Have you had any reports of people who've been unable to receive help from first responders because of these protests?
There was one, one story going around about someone that was delayed, and that was proven not to be the case. The police checked into that. But it's been extremely disruptive for people who work in the healthcare sector, for instance. There's nurses and doctors that I've seen reports on that are 2 hours late getting to their hospital or their clinic. We had to shut down the Rideau Centre. The Rideau Centre, shut down itself because mobs were coming in without masks. We've had 2 coffee shops in the area that have shut down because staff were harassed by anti-maskers. So this is not only taking its toll on mental health, people living in the neighborhood having to put up with the noise and the nonsense, but it's also the economic health of our economy because, as you know, on Monday, restaurants were allowed to open again. Many of the restaurants in the Central Core decided not to open because they feared for their safety in that way. So it's a big cost economically and to mental health and to the social well-being of our constituents.
Can I finish on this? I've lived in the city a long time, and you know the city well too. You've lived here a long time. But I think a lot of people outside the nation's capital don't understand there are kind of 2 cities here. There's the federal legislature, there's the city of monuments, but there's also a living city of people who live and work here every single day. And do you think sometimes that's lost in the idea of protest? People come here with a message they want to give to the federal government, but often the implications are much broader than that for the people who call this home.
That's true. You know, there are 2 Ottawas, the community, the municipality, and the federal government. The problem is that we've never seen any protests like this, which is infringed on the residential part of the community. People who have come to protest, whether it's Black Lives Matter or other important causes, have always been respectful of neighborhoods and communities. They've kept the protest up on the hill. They've worked with the police to coordinate traffic flow and so on. This group of yahoos have arrived here, no planning, no thought put into it, and complete disregard for people who live and work and want to visit the nation's capital. So look at, as the old expression goes, they've overstayed their welcome. It's time for them to move on. And ultimately, the police will take action because this thing can't go on forever.
Our Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson. Always good to talk to you, Mayor Watson. Take care, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Peter. Bye-bye.
Well, let's bring in 3 colleagues now from the Parliamentary Press Gallery, and let's go back to the fate of Erin O'Toole's leadership of the Conservative Party, likely, we think, to be decided perhaps in the next 24 hours. Tonda MacCharles is a reporter with the Toronto Star. Marieke Walsh is a reporter with the Globe and Mail, of which first broke this story on the O'Toole mutiny taking place. And Joël-Denis Bellavance is the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for La Presse. Good to see you all. Thanks for being here. Marieke, if I can, let me start with you. Erin O'Toole's been under attack from within the party by a number of caucus members since the day after the last election. So why have those MPs who oppose him pushed for this caucus vote now? Tell me about the timing.
I think, Peter, there was questions about how strong the dissenting caucus was, especially in the months after the election when not a lot seemed to be happening. But what I'm hearing, and it's my understanding, is that there was a sort of flurry of events in the last week that really pushed people to push for this letter and to push for this vote. And that comes from the caucus, the election review that happened, that people felt like it went too soft on Erin O'Toole, the flip-flopping on the truckers, and all of that kind of led to this momentum for them to push for this vote now, and we'll see where it goes from there. Both sides are saying they have the votes they need.
Yeah, no, let me pick up on that. Tonda, as Marieke touched on, both O'Toole supporters and O'Toole enemies in caucus are saying, look, we got the numbers to win a caucus vote on Erin O'Toole's leadership. And I guess I'm wondering, even if he survives the vote, what kind of comfort should he expect to get from his enemies in caucus?
Look, first of all, whether he survives the vote is a big question tonight. Some who have voted, who have signed that letter, say that they believe they have the support to turf him. But frankly, others say they don't know. It's anybody's guess at this stage. But overall, it's going to be still a huge challenge for him to continue leading, isn't it? Even if he surpasses the simple majority of 60 caucus members to survive the vote, is that the vote of confidence? We've seen other leaders, Ralph Klein, Joe Clark, others have basically take their leave on a much different threshold. I think the fact remains that this is a party still in search of its identity post Stephen Harper. And, look, I talked to a couple of MPs who essentially support keeping Erin O'Toole in place, but not with a lot of enthusiasm, and also wondering, they say that previous voter coalition that kept the party together and brought them to power, that doesn't exist now. That by and large, not only is society fractured, but this party is fractured along philosophical lines.
Joël-Denis, the Quebec caucus of the Conservatives, pretty much solidly behind Erin O'Toole. They've been firm supporters. What are you hearing from them today?
Well, I talked to a few of them today, and the support is eroding. Some of them told me that they were supporting Erin O'Toole up until now, but they plan to vote to oust him because they don't feel he's the man to be able to keep the party united going forward. So Mr. O'Toole is even losing support among traditional supporters, if I may say, in Quebec, because they were supporting his attempt to modernize and bring the party more to the center so that it would be more sellable in Quebec. And those people are planning to vote to kick him out. So and my sense is that Mr. O'Toole does not have enough number to keep his job. If he does have 60+1, that's not enough. Even according to MPs who plan to support him, they feel that this will not resolve the issue. Party unity is at really at all-time low. And I'm told that during the last few caucus meetings, especially last week, everybody was insulting everybody at going to the microphone. So the temperature has gone up. And it's boiling over, and this is the result of the letter.
Marieke, the O'Toole supporters say, this revolt's all about the leader's decision to support and fast-track that Liberal bill to ban conversion therapy. And we saw Alberta MP Ron Liepert say today on his way into Parliament, look, this is all about angry Scheerites, sort of suggesting payback. Supporters of former leader Andrew Scheer looking for, retaliation against O'Toole. What are you hearing from your sources on that idea that, look, this is really a fracture between those social conservatives in the caucus and some of what they view as freelancing that Erin O'Toole's been doing on key policy issues?
I think that's still a bit to be determined, Peter. We don't have the full list of people who signed the letter. Certainly Garnet Genio has said that on the record that it's a cross-section of MPs who did sign this letter. He himself is a social conservative. But that statement from Erin O'Toole last night angered people even more from what I'm hearing, because they viewed his attempt to save his leadership as also further divisions within the party, as sowing division in order to win. And that's not what they want to see right now. So some people are saying they wanted to see more contrition from the conservative leader, given the revolt, the open revolt that he is facing, and that he is not helping things right now.
What are your thoughts on that, Tonda?
Well, I was just going to add to what Marieke says. One MP who I spoke to, who is very much opposed right now to Erin O'Toole's leadership, stressed that this goes way beyond the social conservative wing, and said that's a lot of spin from O'Toole's supporters, that in fact the people who are prepared to vote against him tomorrow include centrists, include people from Ontario and Quebec, include people who would describe themselves as progressives, that it's no longer about simply a social conservative faction.
What are you hearing, Joël-Denis?
Same thing. As Marieke said, the letter that the statement that Mr. O'Toole issued last night angered even those who were supporting him, because they felt that this was a statement that fueled division even more within the Conservative Party. And the irony of it all is that Mr. O'Toole could become potentially the first leader to be kicked out under the Reform Act proposed and adopted by the Parliament in 2015, and that was proposed by Michael Chung. So that would be the irony of it all, that a Conservative Party leader would be ousted by reform proposed by a Conservative MP.
Marieke, let's talk a bit, let's go down the road a little bit on this. Who's waiting in the wings if there is another leadership race? And to be clear, I think this is what would be the third leadership race in 6 years, and some suggesting, look, Erin O'Toole, if he gets voted out by the caucus, if that happens on Wednesday, he might run for the leadership again if he's stripped of it by the caucus tomorrow. So lots to watch here. But who should we be looking at as possible successors to Erin O'Toole, and could that campaign start immediately?
I think you're actually hitting the nail on the head on the factors leading into the decisions for some MPs going into the vote tomorrow. Who actually is the alternative? They've already been down this road twice now since Stephen Harper's government lost in 2015, and it hasn't always worked out. And so I think that, I recall from the last leadership that I spent a week just writing about who wasn't running. So some MPs I'm hearing from, or I'm hearing chatter around, want to actually have some guarantees about what they're actually in for. If they vote against Erin O'Toole, what does that mean for who they have an option of voting for in the months ahead when they do a leadership race? So that's a big question. Obviously, everybody talking about Pierre Poilievre, but it's my understanding that he has not made it clear whether he would or wouldn't run. And he made all the organization in the last leadership race to make a bid for leader and then backed out at the last minute, surprising many people. So I'm not sure he's as clear as some people think he is based on his presence on social media. And then another person to watch, I think, would be Leslyn Lewis, who placed quite well in the last leadership race and won a seat in the House of Commons in the last election.
Let me hear from you on that, Tonda. And I guess one of the things to raise here is, what not just who could a potential leader be, but what you sort of touched on it earlier. What is it they want to lead? What is this party going to actually be going forward? And then that sort of brings you down the road of possible choices, and then takes you back full circle to possible rifts within the caucus and in the party. But all those different factions that you need to consider if you want to run for the leadership.
Well, look, I think we can safely say we've seen those factions on display in the last two leadership races for the Conservative Party. We have seen very divisive races in both cases, which saw Erin O'Toole elected, and we saw the social conservative wing of the party flex its muscle. It's basically about 30%, but if you throw in then, the gun lobby, that's a good chunk of the membership, the party's membership. So yes, the party does have to decide what it stands for, but the truth of the matter is any leader does get to shape a party and its policies. O'Toole has tried, but perhaps he didn't have the people, leadership, caucus management skills to pull it off. To bring the factions together after the fact. But the truth is that whatever leader they're looking for, I think that the Conservatives should and could take a lesson from what many Liberals also see now, is that, there's no savior. A party can't look to a savior to get them, through the tough times. And in O'Toole's case, he's there, but I haven't heard a lot of names of other progressive leaders who might be able to pull off the feat. He seems not to be. What
about coming out of the provinces of Quebec, Joël-Denis? Should we watch for possible leadership contenders there if Erin O'Toole doesn't pass this vote?
Well, the immediate front-runner, if he decides to run, would be Pierre Poilievre. I'm told that he would be possibly being even acclaimed by some of the parties. But I'm told that the progressive branch of the Conservative Party will want to have a progressive candidate, and a lot of pressure will be put on Gérard Deltel to run this time. He almost did last time around, but Jean Charest, the former Premier of Quebec, pulled the rug under his feet when he announced that he was thinking about it, so that all the support he could have had disappeared. I'm also told that some Conservatives would like to see Caroline Mulroney. She's the current Transport Minister in Ontario. They like her. The progressive wing of the party would like her to jump into the federal arena. And also Mark Mulroney is another name that I heard bandied about today. So, but it remains to be seen. I think the one who will decide who runs will be Pierre Poilievre. If he decides to go, I think it's game over. He's going to get it in the bag because he's got some support already, pretty strong support. And in my sense, he's already running a leadership campaign, by the way. He's been hitting the House of Commons and also on social media.
Yeah, maybe just a little. All right, thank you all for your time tonight. Appreciate it, and watch how the story unfolds. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks.
Thank you. Peter.
And that's all for this edition of Primetime Politics. I'm Peter Van Dusen. For all of us here at CPAC, thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.